Right. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, may I warmly welcome you to the Habibie Center's webinar. It is quite unfortunate that this discussion had to be conducted virtually due to the current COVID-19 restrictions. Nevertheless, I hope everyone is well. I am a researcher at the ASEAN Studies program of the Habibie Center, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar on the topic of South Korea in the perspective of millennial generation. As a background, diplomatic relations between Indonesia and Republic of Korea were established in September 1973, and in a few years will mark 50 years of official ties. With a span of almost 5 decades of relations, ties between Jakarta and Seoul have been improving significantly. President Moon Jae-In officially declared the new Southern policy that put forward the 3 Ps of people, prosperity, and peace in 2017. The placing of people as the first of the 3 Ps is an important part of the policy in order to get more understanding of Southeast Asian community, including Indonesia, to further cooperation that has been built in many sectors. In this regard, it entails deepening research to analyze the perception of Indonesian society, especially millennials, towards their understanding about South Korea. To fill this gap, the Habibie Center conducted a public opinion survey involving 400 respondents aged 20 until 39 years old living in Surabaya. The survey finding is expected to help stakeholders from Indonesia and South Korea in formulating a better strategy to strengthen Indonesia-South Korea relations and to increase the understanding as well as behavior of Indonesian society towards South Korean in the future. This webinar on South Korea in the perspective of millennial generation is the final phase of this research. During today's discussion, we will elaborate our findings from the public opinion survey on South Korea in the perspective of Surabaya's millennial generation, which will also be launched and disseminated to the public. This webinar will be featured with 3 separate sessions. The first session, we will have their opening remarks typed on the YouTube's chat feature, and I will read it out later on. For today's discussion, we are joined by our distinguished speakers, and I would like to warmly welcome our speakers. So first, we have Ms. Marina Iker of Research Center for Politics at the National Research and Innovation Agency, or BRIN. Finally, we have Mr. Makbul Mubarak, who is an experienced filmmaker and a socio-cultural enthusiast. We were supposed to have another speaker, Mr. Eri Cahyadi, who was going to represent the government of Surabaya. But unfortunately, we were informed just this morning that he and his team would not be able to attend today's discussion due to an urgent engagement. But nevertheless, I am certain that our speakers who made it to the discussion today will enlighten us with valuable insights. With that said, I hope we can start the discussion as soon as possible, as I believe a lot of us are impatiently waiting for this discussion to commence. So to kickstart the discussion, I would like to firstly invite Mr. Muhammad Hassan Ansori to give an opening remarks as the Executive Director of the Habibie Center. Pa Ansori, please, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Tofan. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Your Excellency, my colleague, Mr. Bai Song-Woon, Director, Korea Foundation, Jakarta Office, and distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor for me to welcome you to this important webinar of launching of our public opinion survey on Indonesia-South Korea relation and the millennial generation. Let me at the very outset to express my sincerest thanks and appreciate to the Korea Foundation for collaborating with the Habibie Center for such an important survey research. May the cherished friendship between our two organizations continue into the foreseeable future and importantly, contribute to build stronger and more mutually beneficial relations between Indonesia and South Korea in the future. In this regard, it is in this regard that I'm delighted first to welcome our esteemed panel again, Mr. Nano Srianto, the researcher of the Center for Political Studies, Indonesian Institute of Science, Habibi, and Mr. Makbul Mubarak, a filmmaker, and last but not least, our researcher, Mr. Marina Ikasari. Thank you so much for being today with us. I look forward to hearing your insightful views and comment on these important issues. Excellency, distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, I think it is rightly said by Tovan, or by the moderator, that diplomatic relation between Indonesia and the Republic of Korea has been established since 1973, and a few years will mark 50 years of official time. And at least to the best of my knowledge and understanding, a wide variety of studies actually have been done to generally examine the relation and narrowly look into Indonesian public perception toward the Republic of Korea. Unfortunately, empirical data-based evidence to measure or judge this public perception and opinion is hardly and rarely found. Most of the studies are conducted using or by case studies oriented. So for this purpose, the Habibie Center, collaborating with the Korea Foundation again, conducted a public opinion survey that tried to look and focus on Surabaya and other major cities in Indonesia to gauge the serious and interconnected survey conducted by the Habibie Center, and will be further followed by similar survey in other major cities in Indonesia. For instance, the first one was just conducted in Jakarta last year, and the survey result was launched on January 4th this year, 2021. But in the end, and as ultimate goal of this survey, a general bigger picture or portrait of Indonesia perception on Korea will and should finally drawn and made. As an evidence-based policy research is first expected relevant and strategic holder, particularly policymakers from both Indonesia and South Korea, in formulating a better strategy to strengthen Indonesia and South Korea relations, and importantly, to increase the understanding of Indonesian society towards South Korea in the future. To end my opening remark, I would like to wish you all a very fruitful discussion and hope that by the end of this webinar, we will have a better understanding of Indonesia and Republic of South Korea relations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pak Ansori. Now, I would also like to invite Mr. Bae Sung-won to also give us an opening remarks as the Director of Korea Foundation Jakarta office. Mr. Bae, please, you may have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Dear distinguished guests, friends from Indonesia, as Director of the Korea Foundation Jakarta office, it is my honor and privilege to participate in today's virtual webinar on South Korea in the perspective of millennial generation, hosted by the Habibie Center. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to Executive Director Muhammad Hassan Ansori and to the researchers from Habibie Center for your endeavor for carrying out the research and in organizing this program today. Also, my gratitude goes out to our speakers for your commitment in joining this webinar despite your busy schedule. As you know, throughout the years, cooperation between our two countries, Indonesia and Korea, have expanded tremendously in so many sectors, such as in diplomacy, economy, academia, and in culture. Now, what I have just said is an assessment of our two countries at this current stage. Now, having said this, for us to enhance the cooperation between the two countries in the future, in other words, to foster Indonesia and Korea relations more concrete and sustainable, we need to have a better understanding of each other, a better and a deeper understanding of each other from various groups in both countries. And I firmly believe that one of the most important group is the millennials. Why? Because they are the future. They are the future of the country. So it is crucial for us to consider and to know how much our future generations, the millennials, understand and know about each other. In today's case, about Korea. Now, in this regard, I believe that through our endeavors today, the ties between Korea and Indonesia will be closer than ever. I personally want to thank various in Indonesia. First, will serve as a stepping stone for which we will develop our next level bilateral cooperation. Korea Foundation, since its establishment 30 years ago, has consistently expanded support in Indonesia to enhance a better understanding of the two countries and to strengthen its bilateral cooperation. Once again, I express my sincere gratitude to Executive Director Mohammed Hassan Ansori and to the researchers from Habibie Center. In particular, my appreciation goes out to all the viewers, as you are the ones who helped build an even better future for the.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bay, for your opening remarks. I believe it is timely for us to move on with the schedule. And our first speaker, Ms. Marina Ikasari, to present and enlighten us with the findings. Mbak Marina, you may take the floor.
Thank you, Taufan. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi researcher of the ASEAN Studies Program at the Habibie Center. For today's webinar, representing the Habibie Center team, I'd like to present our public opinion survey report on South Korea and the perspective of the Surabaya Millennials generation. So the presentation will be divided into several parts: the background, the survey methodology, the demographic profile of respondents, and the findings of for the background relations since 1973. And in 2017, both countries signed the Special Strategic Partnership. This policy put forward 3Ps approach: people, prosperity, and peace. In response, the Habibie Center conducted a public opinion survey of the Surabaya Millennials to follow the previous survey in Jakarta in 2020. We want to take perception towards South Korea from various aspects in a major city beyond Jakarta. Surabaya has been chosen given it's the second largest city in Indonesia, and it has also been collaborating with Busan through the Sister City program for 25 years. So the result of this survey are expected to assist policymakers in formulating better strategies to enhance cooperation between the two countries in the future. 100 people aged between 20 to 39 years living in Surabaya were chosen as respondents of the survey because they are assumed to be productive age and will have vital roles in the future. We use a stratified random sampling technique to analyze the data. And for data collection, trained enumerators held face-to-face interviews from 14 June to 21st June 2021. For the demographic profile of respondents, starting from gender, the comparison is 50% female and 50% male, with most in the age range of 21 to 30 years old. More than half of the respondents are single, and more than 80% are Javanese. As we can see here, 29% of the respondents are students, 28% of the respondents have permanent jobs, mostly work as employees in the private sectors. Regarding the expenditure per month, almost 50% spend 1 to 3 million in a month. Now we move on to the public opinion survey findings from various aspects of the Indonesia-South Korea partnership, including economy, socio-cultural, political, and bilateral relations. Before asking respondents in Surabaya about their perception towards South Korea, we asked them the first thing that comes to their minds about South Korea. And the top two answers were Korean dramas and K-pop music, with 22% and 80% respectively. 2/3 of respondents know about South Korea through art and culture. In this part, we can see the Surabaya Millennials' experience of interaction and visiting South Korea. More than 90% of respondents admitted that they have never had first-hand experience interacting with South Koreans. Interestingly, in terms of experience perception of South Korea as a country, the majority of respondents, reaching just over 60% agreed with the statement that South Korea's economy is advanced, the social and political life of South Korea is democratic, technology in South Korea is advanced, and Korean culture is popular abroad. Aside from that, we also asked respondents about the national characteristic of Koreans. More than 65% agreed that South Koreans are friendly, and about 78% agreed that South Koreans have a high level of discipline. Even for the statement of South Koreans as hard workers, just about 80% agreed on it. We also explored millennials' interest in various products of South Korea. More than 45% of respondents in Surabaya were interested and were very interested in Korean food, where most of them consumed Korean food once a month in the past month. When talking about their interest in Korean dramas or movies, more than half of the respondents were interested and were very interested in Korean dramas or movies variables. We should note those who did and who were very interested are only less than 2% being interested. Those who were interested say that they listened in Surabaya also stated that regarding the Korean electronic products, the difference between it turns out that the percentage of who were interested in cosmetic processes on whether they favor Korean dramas or movies, language, fashion, cosmetic, electronic, and automotive products compared to these things from other countries. Surprisingly, the number of respondents also consider dramas or movies, foreign languages, and products from other countries beyond Korea. After explaining the economic and socio-cultural issues, I'll touch on hard issues related to Indonesia and South Korea bilateral relations. Just above 95% of respondents assessed that bilateral relations between Indonesia and South Korea are good and very good. It's also in line with the assessment of the benefits of bilateral relations between both countries. 90% of respondents agreed and strongly agreed with the statement. There were three main areas of cooperation expected to be enhanced between Indonesia and South Korea in the future chosen by respondents, such as science and technology, economy, and education sectors. Now we talk specifically about the sister city program between Surabaya and Busan, and picked by the respondents for the future collaboration under the sister city program were economy, education, science, and technology fields. In addition, the Millennial barely knew the existence of the Korea Trade Investment Promotion Agency or KOTRA in Surabaya office. We also raised questions on cooperation between Indonesia and South Korea amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. 82% of respondents agreed that Indonesia and South Korea cooperate closely in managing the COVID-19 pandemic. The Millennials in Surabaya suggested for Indonesia to pursue cooperation with South Korea in the context of handling the pandemic in the top three areas. First is cooperation to produce medical devices. Second is cooperation to develop vaccines, and to normalize education cooperation. In contrast, the tourism is the least essential aspect to pursue with less than 4%. To sum up, here are the main findings of the survey. Despite most respondents representing the Surabaya millennial generation having minimal experience interacting directly with Koreans or visiting South Korea, they generally have a positive perception of South Korea as plans to be positive. Regarding the bilateral relations between Indonesia and South Korea, most respondents considered that the bilateral relations between the two countries had been going well. However, when we talk specifically about the sister city cooperation between Surabaya and Busan, surprisingly, most millennials have no idea about it. There is also the potential for cooperation to be increased between Indonesia and South Korea in the future. According to most respondents, cooperation in science and technology, economy, and education are areas of cooperation that Indonesia and South Korea should improve in the future. This could be understood considering the respondent of this survey are millennials aged 20 to 39 years old, the productive age range using technology. So that's all for our survey findings. I'll stop here. Thank you for your attention. Good afternoon.
Thank you very much for the very in-depth presentation, Marina, which covers a lot of various aspects that are necessary for us to really know how deep is the relations between Indonesia and South Korea. I think it is now timely for us to move on to Mr. Nanto Srianto. As mentioned, Mr. Nanto Srianto is the researcher of Research Center for Politics at the National Research and Innovation Agency, or BRIN. He also serves as a vice manager and responsible for coordinating research groups under the National Priority Research, who works under the supervision of LIPI Kemenristek, which aims to provide coordinating research that's supporting current national policy agenda 2020 until 2024. I believe that Mr. Nanto Srianto's expertise from his extensive experience will deepen our discussion today. With that said, may I now give the floor to you, Mr. Nanto, please.
Thank you, Tovan. Mr. Bae Sungbon, Bapak Hasan, ladies and gentlemen, can you hear my voice clearly?
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Okay, thank you. It is an honor and privilege to speak and comment about the research findings held by the Habibie Center, and I think it is very informative, and based on my expertise, I would like to comment and focus on the millennials and the middle power activism. I think this is my third time speaking about Korea and invited. I think we have met virtually with. I have met virtually with Mr. Bae Sungbon, and I think my focus is relatively quite the same with how do Indonesia and Korea could coordinate their middle power activism. So yeah, let me share my PPT. It is okay. I'm asked to comment about the strategic issues, but I just straightly want to focus about millennials and the future of middle power activism. I think my subtitle is not quite common, but I think the agenda, the issues, especially under the current condition of regional dynamics, when the great power politics dominate, have clearly taken and state their position that the local narratives are also important. That's why I choose. And then the research by going to be expanded into other cities in Indonesia. We're going to have a big pictures about how does the current perception of millennials about the relation between the two nations, and in the future, I hope, and I think we can have a good expectation that the future people-to-people relations between the two countries can be strengthened and be more can touch more strategic issues compared to the present days. Okay, I would like firstly I want to touch the from the regional dynamics that surrounding the Indonesia and South Korea, and I think I would like to start with the Asian financial crisis. Why do I choose this historical epoch, since it is affected the Indonesia and Korea as well? We know that the South Korea and Indonesia has been severely affected by the crisis, in which I think the Indonesia in the early 2000 Indonesia, Australia, Turkey, and Mexico joined MICTA during the session in the New York. So after that, I would like to point out about the global financial crisis, and then the China rise and BRI, and then Quad and Indo-Pacific discourse, and the last two is about new Southern policy of South Korea and the Asian outlook on Indo-Pacific. What I want to underline between the two policy initiatives of South Korea and Indonesia through ASEAN is that we know, despite the emerging and dominating the security policy narratives, I think the local narrative is also important, since in new Southern policy, the focus is about people, peace, and prosperity, something that's more in international relation would call it as low politics. But I think nowadays we cannot distinguish between low and high. It is a matter of perspective, and I think South Korea, by emphasizing and focusing on the so-called low politics, it also maintained that we should have our own voice amid the cacophony of regional dynamics. So, and I think it is also echoed in Asian outlook and in Indo-Pacific, which the focus is on infrastructure and inclusiveness. So both countries have position and also narrating the local interests, despite that there is a great power politics. And then I want to make a brief comparison between Indonesia and South Korea. Basically, it is my selective indicating about how does Indonesia as a country claiming itself as a regional power with global interests in Indonesia, since its independence, also understand that the great power management and strategic autonomy are the two most important issues. That's why we remain steadfastly support our independence and active foreign policy. And then we also agree, we also understand that the Indonesia as a post-colonial stage understand that the maintenance of its territorial and sovereignty is one of the important things, and also its regional focus, especially since Indonesia put ASEAN as one of the cornerstone of its foreign policy. It is can be seen as that Indonesia can neglect the regional dynamics, despite the needs to focus on domestic economic development. And then I think Indonesia in recent years also understand that the economic issues and the way the path of development can be has to be accepted as something that can be interpreted as a national path, in which I think Indonesian considered economic issue also as an emerging security concern, in which we know that we no longer want to be disrupted by destabilized economic issue like the Asian financial crisis, for example, and that's why Indonesia considered security and development as a nexus, something that closely interrelated. And I think another similarities can be found in the South Korean experience, since like in this South Korean experience, Cold War and great power competitions is very close up until now, and the regional security issues and Cold War mechanism still there, since six-party talks and other symmetry has been held and cannot be sidelined the great power interest in this case. And the second one, I think, is the successful development of South Korea has made South Korea as one of the important of donor countries, which I think the special things of South Korea in this case is that it's claimed that though it's previously a recipient country, the successful development path can make a country become a donor country like Korea. So it is, I think that in the next slide, and I want to give more emphasis on this. So in this case, located in the very, I think, volatile region, especially since there is North Korea in this case, I think economic security nexus is also part of the South Korean interest. And I want to back to Indo-Pacific discourse as nexus, in which I think we cannot separate between the geopolitics and geoeconomics. However, also we want to stress that the domestic concern is also important. The needs to understand, the needs to respond to international dynamic is become the concern of both countries, and the needs to maintain national interests is another important point, and the needs to have a regional stability and national sovereignty, in which most of the concern of middle power and small power is their strategic autonomy. When there is a great power competition, I think what's it's gonna be hinder or hamper the strategic autonomy of small and middle countries. The next one that I want to find that one of the strategic issues between Indonesia and South Korea is how does the middle convergence. I think in this case, the right to develop is an important issue, which become more implementable and locally perspective by other countries, such as I think there is South Korean scholars who have a interesting point that the development itself should be in this case is path dependence or locally by the areas of the nation. So there is no such a blueprint model in this case, which the dominant of state in the development and the US that propose more private dominant. Indonesia and South Korea could propose a more locally bound perspective of development projects. And how does the middle power, especially since the last one is the issue of AUKUS, I think maybe Indonesia and South Korea can have a different perspective, but I think in this case, in order to maintain its middle power activism, it can be that the source of middle power activism for every middle power countries can be come from the issue of great power politics, the middle power coalition, and the domestic demands. In the case of bilateral relation between Indonesia and South Korea, I would like to focus on the two factors, the domestic demand and the middle power coalition. In this case, the domestic demand can be treated as a millennial perception, on which I think the young generation can be a source of given to the such as the traditional actors like foreign ministries or government, but also in this case, middle power moment for Indonesia and South Korea can come from broadening the actorness, I think, of other actor in the local, in the domestic. In this case, we know that the private sector has start to play increasing their role, but however, the young generation is the actor that we already acknowledge their importance, but we need to strengthen them. I just want to go to touch a bit about the result and the findings of the recent research report by the Habibie Center. In this case, I want to say that it is that mostly of the respondents say that it is good, the bilateral relation between Indonesia and is in good condition. But however, I want to say that this is a matter of level of income, in which the exposure, I think the previous speaker already said that most of the respondents never come to South Korea due to the financial condition, but however, they know about South Korea. So due to the current technology, such as smartphone and other things, so the exposure about South Korea is relatively high. But I do not know that whether the exposure of Indonesia in South Korea. I may see that the role of YouTuber in this case is quite important. And then I think maybe beside the broad survey, I think selective, I don't know how to call it. I'm not expert on this survey, but maybe we can call it as an expert survey or selective engagement to the media influencer can be the next research agenda, because I think understanding those strategic actors, I can call them YouTubers as a strategic actors, can be a source of deepening bilateral relations between Indonesia and South Korea. And about the issues that become the concern of the respondents, I think it is already there, that the economic concern and so on. And I think about how does most of the respondents acknowledge the successful and the status of high technology from Korea, South Korea. And then I think, yeah, this is a good condition, but in the other way, we still have like a blank page about how does the how do the South Koreans, the younger, the millennials from South Korean consider the Indonesia. And this is my final slide. I just want to that what they call as a millennial is that Indonesia South Korea is actually the bilateral relation between Indonesia and South Korea is actually goes beyond the current situation. The picture on the right, I quote it from the Historia, his magazine. It is a picture of two Korean soldiers who support Indonesian independence, and they were captured by the Dutch, and they were finally heroically faced the death sentence. And I think this is what I want to say by the picture is that the relations between Indonesia and South Korea could no longer ignore the great power politics and the regional dynamics. So despite the positive trend of K-pop and other millennials, they should embrace more than the pop culture. What I want to add, another point that I want to add is that we have a good exposure of South Korean studies in Indonesia, Korean studies in Indonesia, supported by South Korean government. And I think it is one of the important pillars of the bilateral relations. But I want to quote one of the comment of the researcher of this issue, that I think the Korean studies should go beyond the language, in which Indonesians should know more about Koreans. Like what I said before, how does the Korean successfully manage to become developed countries. It is one of the examples. So basically, I think in the future, Korean studies also focus on how does the Korean develop their economics, how does the Korean develop their other successful.
So, and that session, I would like to suggest viewers that questions could be written in our live chat feature on YouTube, and I will be reading it later on our Q&A session. Now it is time for us to welcome Makbul Mubarak is a filmmaker and socio-cultural enthusiast. He has an extensive filmmaking experience with the latest movie released in 2020 entitled Autobiography, which successfully won the Opening Doors Hub at the Locarno Film Festival 2019. He also serves as an academician and lecturer for several subjects, including moving image production, moving image theory, screen direction, image and sound concept, and final project pre-production at the Multimedia Nusantara University. I believe that Mr. Makbul Mubarak's perspective on socio-cultural aspects will deepen our discussion today. With that said, may I now give the floor to you, Mr. Makbul, please.
Thank you. I will try to share my PowerPoint. I just want to verify, do you guys see it clearly?
Yes, it's clear over here.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning from my place here in France. It's still dark here. It's winter. Yeah. So it was very illuminating listening to the previous findings of researchers. So the perks of being an artist is that you can use your own self as a ground for research. It's very egoistic, but I think I would love to approach this discussion from a slightly different angle. That is to use myself as a sort of site of reflection. And I lived in South Korea for quite a while, back in 2012 to 2014. I first came there as a student. I didn't know anything about South Korea before, but I found out that there is one university in Seoul, which is called Korea National University of Art, or in Korea they call it 한국예술종합학교, 한예종, which is offering, but more than that, learning about the culture and the people. I consciously chose a roommate that is totally Korean. Usually, like foreign students, they live with foreign students, but like I don't want to live with foreign students. I want to live with Korean students because I wanted to know them better. Yeah, I lived in the span of 2 years. I lived with friends from Busan, from Daejeon, from Pohang, different regions in Korea, and my first findings at that moment is that wow, Korea is so different from Indonesia in the sense that language, everybody in Korea speaks Korean, and Indonesia, not every Indonesian speak each other's language. I mean, we speak Indonesian, but not all of us. They're quite homogeneous, but also quite different because, for example, Busan, Daejeon, and Pohang have different views of politics, of cultures, of each other. They have a way of seeing each other, which is kind of different. I'm so sorry that my PowerPoints switch languages quite chaotically. And then I got a experience to work as a freelance translator. I managed to make a film for National Geographic Korea, a documentary called The Fourth World. And from that on, after I graduated in 2014, I still go back and forth to South Korea because there is this major event in film industry, the field where I work in, called Busan Yonghwaje, Busan International Film Festival. This is one of the most important film hub in Asia. So like if you want to do like international film making co-production like I do, you have to come to Busan International Film Festival every year because everybody is there and you can do business, you can watch films, you can deal, sign contracts. sell your films, buy other films. It's like a market. It's like an expo where you can sell and buy films or pitch a project or meet an investor, whatever. It's one of the most important hub. Aside from in Southeast Asia, it's Singapore, but in Asia in general, it's Busan is one of the biggest. The other being Goa Film Bazaar in India. Okay. So yeah, I would, as someone that doesn't really understand about politics or high diplomacy, I usually concerned of, culture from a vernacular kind of approach, from a daily life, from my own experience. This is what we do as a filmmaker. We don't really do statistics. We do more of a feelings or perspectives. Yeah, and one of the most interesting thing that I've observed is that I find out that when I was in Korea, I found out that not every Korean film has a popularity in Asia. There are some of Korean films that are not famous, quote unquote, outside of Korea. They are very famous in Korea. Everybody watch them, but they're not very famous abroad. Meanwhile, it's kind of different when it comes to Korean drama. 90% of Korean drama are popular abroad. Like my sister in Sulawesi, I'm from Sulawesi. My sister watched it at home. She doesn't know anything about Korea. She's never been there, but she watched every Korean drama's content. And it was very interesting to me to listen to the findings before that. 22% of Korean drama's popularity compared to 6% of Korean movie, which kind of like confirmed that Korean dramas enjoy more a popularity than Korean films. And as someone who was studying film at the time, I was like, why is it like that? Why is it different from Hollywood? In Hollywood, films are more popular. Korean dramas, well, I mean, now because of Netflix, the American series are increasing in popularity, but before, no. Meanwhile, in South Korea, the TV content is more popular. Like you watch Korean dramas, Hometown Cha Cha Cha, whatever, and Korean films. Yes, they're famous. Parasite won Oscar, but not everything. Not every film. This is one of my. It looks random. The photo. It's fans of K-pop boy band EXO in Jakarta, almost killing each other to see their idols. It's quite funny for me. Like, the Ukti, the Muslim people. Like, wow, being crazy about the SM entertainment boy band. This is also one of my concern. The second point, I come from a Muslim family. My sister wear hijab, but she's like so in love with all these boy bands, all the K-pop stuff. So, and I was like, why? We have so different of a principle. We are like a Muslim who's not supposed to look at someone else's body. And here you are enjoying the dance of this Korean women. This is, for me, it's very interesting. I want to know. And in Korea, like, I want to find out about this. What happened? Maybe there is some commonalities between two countries that allow us for further conversation. So this is the second point that I was very interested in. Yeah, so in South Korea, they make a difference. Usually in Indonesia, when we talk about Korean film, the Indonesian people do not really make a differentiation between film and drama. They think that Korean drama is also a film. Film is also a drama. Meanwhile, it's a very different. In South Korea, it's a different industry. Film, it's they call it Yonghwa, and it has its own industry, which is the film industry. And K-drama is a little bit separated from that. It belongs to the broadcast industry. It's a TV industry. They call it bangsong. And for example, in my university where I study, these two are completely different departments. The film school and the broadcast school are two different things. We use different cameras. We learn different subjects. It's totally different world. The actors sometimes are, but the actors in Korea, they come from the theater program, not from film, not from drama. They have their own different school. Okay, so just to make this difference, and Korean film, it's just a very general overview. A lot of blockbuster Korean film, they rely a lot on genre. They're either tearjerker, they are made to make you cry, a thriller, they're to thrill you, like a costume drama, horror, romance, romantic comedy. There are a lot of exploration of genres. There are very rarely Korean film that is very famous without a genre. What I mean by genre is that without a genre means like a drama or you know, like not, there is no like a certain amount of genre convention. And a lot of them have this blockbuster mentality, which is ingrained in their scenario, sometimes in the story. Like, you don't even have to know about Korean culture to really relate with the story. This is what I call blockbuster mentality. The Hollywood do that. You don't have to understand about American culture to cry when you watch Lion King. Like, you don't even have to be a lion to cry when you watch Lion King. It's so universal, and the Korean film has this blockbuster mentality, which is, I have to say, is very lacking in Indonesia. We are so crazy about local story. We're so crazy about finding what is the Indonesian identity, up to the point that other people from outside of Indonesia do not understand what the content is. This is something that I think I learned a lot from my peers in South Korean filmmakers. They really think about this, like, okay, we Korean understand it, but what about when Pakistani watch it? What about when a Jordan people watch it? Do they understand it? This is interesting. And this is ingrained in their theme, in the writing, a plot, in the story, in the genre that they use, because genre is very universal. This is, I think, is a genius strategy to sell your content. Make it in the form of genre, because genre is the same everywhere. Genre is a universal language. Horror in the US and horror in Indonesia is the same. They have different ghosts. Yes, we have this pocong ghost, which looks like a candy. In the US, they have a different kind of ghost, but horror film means to scare you. It's the same. And Korean film industry do this also. So this is important. Some Indonesian filmmakers do it. For example, The Raid, they make it in action film. Action film is the same everywhere. You fight, one win, one lose. It's the same. And The Raid was quite successful in North America. I even watched The Raid for the first time in Myeongdong, in Seoul. So I was in Seoul watching an Indonesian film. I was like, oh, so if we do what the Koreans do in their use of genre, we also can thrive, I think. Okay, this is one of the findings. But there are a lot of Korean films that are very culturally specific. They cannot really enjoy an international popularity. For example, this one, they call it Dongnipyeonghwa in Korea, like independent film, but not necessarily independent, because look at this film in the middle. It's called Daran Naraeso, I think. It's called In Another Country. It stars a superstar, Isabelle Huppert, very famous in the world, playing in a Korean film. This film was virtually unknown. And the other one is called, here on the right side, is called Miryang, Secret Sunshine. It stars Song Kang-ho, one of the big stars of Parasite, who won Oscar, very famous in South Korea. But this film didn't enjoy a lot of popularity abroad compared to other Song Kang-ho's films, such as Taxi Driver and Parasite, of course. But when it comes to Korean drama, like 95% of them are just boom, famous. Like everybody watch it. Like everybody on Twitter talking about it. Everybody was angry when their favorite characters got betrayed by their lover, whatever. And they have a very high popularity. They're loved by everybody. Their actors are trending topic in social media. They invited a lot of people visiting South Korea. When I was a student there, I got a lot of job taking Indonesian tourists to some random hospital because this hospital was the set that was shot in their favorite Korean drama. So like, oh, I want to go to the hospital where my favorite character was hospitalized, you know? So I went there and was like, what the hell is happening at this hospital? It's just a usual hospital. But you know, like it increases the tourism. Nami Island became famous in Seoul because of a Korean drama. I forgot the title, but like it's full of Indonesian and Malaysians and Filipinos. Okay. And it makes people want to learn Korean language, including me. Like I love, I think Korean language is such a beautiful language. And it makes people using Korean language even if they're Indonesia. I study in a university in Tangerang. One day I was in the elevator and I listened to my students, two of them, both Indonesians, talking in Korean. It's like, oh, amazing. Like really like this low, what we call low politics or a low culture or popular culture. It really, it's so powerful, like amazing. But why is the drama, the Korean drama is so ingrained in the daily life of Indonesian audiences? Meanwhile, it was not the first wave, you know. Before Korean dramas, there was the Japanese dramas. Maybe you remember, like as a kid, like I watched a lot of Japanese drama. That there was a lot of Chinese drama. You know, Bibilung, Yoko. Like when I was still a kid, I watched this a lot on TV. But none of them enjoy popularity as big as Korean drama. And I really wanted to know why. Why are we so obsessed with it? And surprisingly, my finding is not very technical. My finding is more of a something of a cultural psyche. It was very interesting to me to start to analyze what are the elements that are always exist in a Korean drama. It never absent. Okay, first, there are two characters. This is in every Korean drama, except lately for Squid Game, it's kind of exception. But there are two kind of characters. Usually one is not rich, usually quite poor, but she has integrity. They are generally women, female character. And the other one is a rich guy, have a lot of problem, but has a lot of money. And usually, of course, both of them are very pretty and good looking. And the ending is always the same. The character who has integrity, the woman, usually woman, sometimes hometown chow cha 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 cha, for example, they reverse it, but it's usually woman who is poor. The ending, the female character will be able to marry the rich. They are in love, and finally the poor become rich while not losing her integrity. So she become rich because of integrity. This is it's always this is what we call like a convention. It's unwritten, but it's always like that. Whatever Korean drama is, whether it's periodic, horror, fantasy, the core is always the same: romance. No Korean drama without romantic elements. It's always there. It's what makes us watch it. It's unlike film. A thriller film is a thriller film, but a thriller Korean drama is still a romance. This is very obvious. And with integrity being proposed by a king, a rich king. It's, you know, like a lot of our fairy tales, a lot of our folklores are about this, about economic gap, and suddenly the poor will become rich because she has, you know, she's very hardworking. She has a lot of integrity in herself. Indonesian stories, Indonesian people love are also the same. They become, you know, like when you watch Indonesian, they will tell you like life lessons. Oh, you should do this, you should do that. It's the same with the grandma and grandpa in Korean drama. And Indonesian people, Indonesian folklores, Indonesian films really believe in this, what we call takdir, which is like a destiny. Like, you know, human being can try the hardest, but the God will decide for them, or destiny will decide for them. It's a very common element in Indonesian shows, sinetron, for example. In the Indonesian sinetron, it's full of coincidence, it's full of destiny, it's full of talking elders, it's full of romance but no sex. It's full of economic gap between the two main characters. It's the same. But of course, the quality, the technical quality is different. So for me, it's a very important. It's very interesting that the Indonesian cultural psyche that comes from mostly Islamic religion and the Korean teachings that comes mostly from Confucianism is the same. It's, you know, like they are common. And I want to use this cultural psyche to and I want to call it a cliche, because cliche is something that exists, you know, cliche is something that is true everywhere, that if you repeat it, it becomes a cliche. Like it's norak, you know, in Indonesian, we call it kenoraan. It's cliche. A lot of people say that norak, alay is a bad thing. It's like, alay loh, gitu. It's a bad thing. But for me, I think alay and norak, a cliche, is a medium of interaction. A cliche in my culture, when it's the same with a cliche in your culture, it enables us to speak. It enables us to interact. Culture, you know, results in cliche. Cliche is usually be original. Everyone has to be a genius. When you're a cliche, you're a failure. But I think, why not? Like I see cliche as something that can make us talk to each other. You know, in Korea, full romance, no sex. Me too. In Indonesia, it's the same. Maybe we can talk. So this is where I see the potentials of this cultural commonalities, is of speaking to each other, of strengthening the bond. It can be an entry point to know each other. So not to talk about differences all the time, but also to talk about the sameness. Probably, maybe cliche is actually a transnational language. Yeah. So this is one of my findings. I hope it intrigues some further discussions. Of course, I don't explain to you what kind of method do I use. It's fully observational, so it's fully debatable. Also, I hope it will make for a interesting discussion later. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Makbul Mubarak, for a very interesting perspective on sociocultural aspects, particularly in films and movie industry. I mean, so far we've been talking about politics, security, and all that, but now it's you put a light on the film industry, which is very interesting for our discussion. So I think we could move on to our last session. We can turn to the Q&A session. We have a few questions already from our participant. So I will read them out to the speakers. I will look at the questions for a bit. So there's this question. I guess this is for all of the speakers. Korea has made their pop culture a part of their global diplomacy strategy, such as BTS at the UN. Why hasn't our creative industry in Indonesia been able to reach that level? Please, whoever want to speak out first, the floor is yours.
Okay. First, can I
for Mas Makbul Mubarak on this particular case? You were telling me that due to quantity or the quantity of content produced by Korea entertainment industry plays a huge significance. But I mean, we can also see that a huge amount of quantity content, maybe not quality, but quantity produced in Indonesia is also varied in numbers, you know. And do you have like any kind of tips or like tricks or aspirations or hopes for Indonesia film industry or entertainment industry in general to kind of reach the level of Korea in this time and age, please?
I think government incentives is very important. In South Korea, I know that the government have a lot of help for cultural workers, even if you're not Korean. For example, I'm an Indonesian filmmaker. I can access fundings from South Korea for my film, which is an Indonesian film. They have a program called Asian Cinema Fund, which is for everybody in Asia to access. This is incentives. So if they help a lot of foreigners, can you imagine how much do they help their own filmmakers? So there are incentives for business. There are incentives for film theaters. There is incentives for exports. There are incentives. So there are incentives. So people are really interested to create content, because by creating content, you will receive incentives from the government. You have to compete with the other producer, but competition creates quality. So I think one of the tips. I mean, I'm not a government or government or government experts, but I'm a filmmaker who enjoys a lot of benefits from the incentives created by the Korean government, the foreign government. Like now, I'm making a film helped a lot by the incentives from the Republic of France. That's why, like, it's a lot of other countries are doing that. My education was 100% sponsored by the South Korean government. Like, it's crazy how much their supports, and they're not thinking about South Korean anymore. They're thinking about a broader territory. So I think incentives is one of the key. The locals, but the local producers.
Thank you. Yeah, I really agree with you, strongly agree with you, especially if the government made it as a priority for developing the film industry or the entertainment industry in general. And yeah, it's very interesting your perspective on this. Probably I see that Marina has a question. Over to you, Marina, please.
Okay, thank you, Tovan. I have two questions for Pak Nanto and Mas Makbul. First, for Pak Nanto, I want to touch on defense cooperation between Indonesia and South Korea. Currently, the KFX, IFX jet fighter cooperation still postponed. And how do you analyze the potential of this cooperation in developing the KFX, IFX jet fighters? And for Mas Makbul, we know that the popularity of Korean dramas or movies can be achieved not only because of people's creativity in this industry, but also with the support of Korean government. As you are in the film industry field, I'd like to know your opinion on what should Indonesia learn from Korea to advance our film industry. Thank you.
Please, Pak Nanto, for your
okay.
responses.
Thank you, Marina. First, I want to admit that I'm not an expert on military issue, but yeah, regarding the political security issue, I think I know that Indonesia considered South Korea as a good partner in terms of expanding and diversing the source of military modernization, especially on the submarine technology. And regarding this submarine technology, I can assure you that why does the cooperation is successful is due to the I think direct and is important, but in this case we know that another part of the issue is, I think nowadays is concerned on maritime issue. So I'm not saying that there is gonna be how do you call it, can be a big issue, but I think I'm not expert of this actually, but yeah, we can say that it is a matter of technicalities of focus on the other concern. I know that nowadays the Minister of Defense led by Pak Prabowo is very vibrant and active, but I think the focus is on how to synchronize the current cooperation. I think that's the issue, that the reason why there is a postpone of this. I just want to add another issue about the bilateral issue about Mas Makbul said that how does the young Indonesian, there are so many young Indonesians speak fluently Korean, and I have an experience in Makassar when there is a occasion about there's a Kemlu session in Unhas, Universitas Hasanuddin, Mikta goes to campus. At the time, the representative from Korean embassy was so surprised about how does the students also speak Korean. So I think it is, I told him that this is a great benefit for Korea. I think the PR is already been done by the pop culture, but how does to engage more about more substantial issue is also important things. I think one of the important, and I think the issue of Indonesia to learn from South Korea is, I agree with Mas Makbul about how do we capitalize of creative industry. In Indonesia, we have I don't know. I have watched the Korean movie in 90s. I think it was I think one of the movie copycatting the Hollywood. But Korean movie at the time, I think it is good at cinematography. But how does the South Korean movie makers develop their writing skill or script and so on? It is something so astonishing for me, and it is not happen in Indonesia. So I think how to build a creative industry in a country with a population, small population compared to Indonesia, it is a great success. And one of the important things of Indonesia is outward looking. I just recently joined a focus group discussion about Indonesian aid, and I think I told the discussants that the one of the important things about Indonesian foreign policy is that foreign policy is no longer the sole responsibility of foreign ministry. In this broadening the actors, other actor in Indonesia, like sister city. So we call it para diplomacy. It is an issue. The para diplomacy, to a certain extent, has been hindered or not so successfully developed because of the regulation of or the ideas of the local governance is so relatively inward looking. We know that in Indonesia, numbers of Department of International Relations has already increased, especially after 1998. But does the increasing numbers of international relations students has been absorbed in the local government, that in the end lead to an outward looking of the local government relatively questionable. So I did field work in last June, and the idea of several cities in Indonesia have a different outward looking is so astonishing. It is quite wonder. this is not a matter of rich or poor cities in Indonesia, or high or low income cities in Indonesia, but how do we find an outward vibrant local government to cooperate and jointly develop something that useful with.
Okay. Responding to the questions, what should the government do? I think it's not just about the government. I think it should go both ways. The government, yes, of course, they should help with incentives, like I already explained before. Incentives in every aspects of the industry, in the film theaters, in the exports, in the imports, in the filmmaking, in the everything. But also, I think the creators, I want to quote from Pak Nanto saying that you have to be outward looking as a creator. Like you have to produce a content that is not enjoyable by only the Indonesian people. Of course, there's always a delusion, I think, from the Indonesians that, oh, we are a huge market. We are 207 freaking thousand people. But when you look at it from the perspective of a film industry, how many film theaters are for the 270,000 people? We only have 2,000 screens in 2,000 for a 270 million people. It's a small market compared to South Korea. They have like 80 million people. It's thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of film theaters. They are a big market. So this is a thing that for us filmmakers, content creators, illustrators, artists, we have to think about expanding our audiences, not just markets, but audiences. We have to think outward, think about selling it somewhere else. Think about content that people from outside of Indonesia will enjoy, and not just to please your friends and parents. It's because this is I think it's a very Indonesian mentality. Like, they are so crazy about themselves, they forget that the world is very large. And as someone you have as someone creative, as someone that always creates something, you have to think about the world out there. And if you ask me what we should learn from Korea, they have been always thinking about Asia since they always think about the Asia as market. And now BTS BTS is a very important stepping up of the game, because now they don't really think about Asia anymore. They think about the world. BTS performed at the UN. They spoke at the UN. So it's a bigger game for them. But it's a product of a constant outward thinking. Like, let's think about the world and not just about ourselves. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pak Nanto and Mas Makbul, for the interesting answers. We have 3 other questions. This is from Antang from Nanyang Academy of Fine Arts. I believe this question is for Mas Makbul. The first question is, this is quite interesting. Is Parasite culturally specific or blockbuster movie? That's the first question. Do you think is it more convenient for you if I tell you all the questions first? Okay, yes. So that's the first question, and the second question is, what do you think is the most significant thing that the Korean government do to make this Korean movie industry well known throughout the world? And then the third question is, do Korean government involve in creative decision in making movies, or just the regulatory-based involvement?
Okay. Is Parasite a global or local content? Parasite is quite an exception. I think it's both. It's both. It's both very local, especially when you know a Korean language. They use a very, very different choice of words. Very, very specific sometimes. Very specific dialects also. I think it's both, and it's not impossible to make both. Like a product that has both mentality, but you have to be very good. You have to be Bong Joon-ho to make this. Second, what was the second question? I believe the second question was, so what exactly did the government do to help this? Just to illustrate something, the South Korean government has this body called a KOCA, I think, Korean Content Creative Agency. So it's a specialized body that help the export and the thriving of Korean creative industry. This is something we don't have in the country. We used to have it called Bekraf, Badan Ekonomi Kreatif. I don't know why they disbanded it. It's dismissed already. It exists only in one term of Joko Widodo's presidency, and when he entered his second term, it was dismissed. We used to have this body also. It helped me personally a lot as an Indonesian filmmaker. For example, if I want to join a forum in Europe or in the US to promote Indonesian films, they help to pay the flights, the visas, the hotels. So they're really helpful, but they got dismissed after. Yeah, the Korean government have this, and the body is very strong. You can Google KOCA, KOCCA. And the third question, I believe, was, is the government involved in the creative decision making of the content? No, it only happens in a dictatorship country. The government should be clear of what the artists want to say. If that happens in Indonesia, I think we're in danger. But so far, no. Like we are. South Korea is a very democratic country. I'm not sure about the North, but yeah, the government never has had a say in the content, but they help their citizen regardless. Yeah.
Can I ask something about regarding the creative content? Yeah, it is important. Yeah, just about democracy itself. Like, yeah, I think South Koreans know that they fight for their democracy. You can learn that this is the things that I want to say about that. We should go beyond this language. We should go beyond K-pop, because I think there is several movies about how does the South Korean fight for democracy, even though like they know they start with a big authoritarian country, but lead by a general or something. But when they state that we say it and they maintain that, then in Indonesian case, in every democratic countries, creativity can be flourished, right? And in that case, an artist can be more creative, commenting anything without like. I think there's several problems in Indonesia when I'm not saying it is an imminent, but I think we should maintain our democratic vibrant. We should maintain that it's not also about speaking our minds, but it's also related to political economy. And about screens, I think we should focus on how does the cinema industry be more supporting by not or monopolized by a single actor. I think in this case, in every economy, in every democratic countries, monopoly is not a source of creativity. It is like you can they can regulate the standard that not actually demand by the audience, like in the TV. How does the quality of the TV movies, TV programs in Indonesia? I think it is because the provider or production house is dominated by certain people. I'm not an expert, but I think we can guess this political economy of cinematography or TV programs is not yet democratic, I think, in Indonesia.
Thank you so much, Pak Nanto, for your insights and feedbacks and comments on this particular issue. Pak Nanto, or maybe Pak Mr. Bay, regarding to our research findings. If not, then I think we have come to the end of today's discussion. I would like to thank our three speakers, Ms. Marina Ikasari, Mr. Nanto Srianto, and Mr. Makbul Mubarak for your insights on this issue and for all of your comments and responses. I would also like to thank the Korea Foundation for the endless support and cooperation. It has been an immense honor for the Habibie Center to collaborate with you all for this research project. I would also like to thank our participants for taking part into today's discussion and have been very active, asking a bunch of very great questions and interesting questions for our discussion today. I hope all of you have enjoyed our webinar. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I look forward to seeing you in the Habibie Center's other events. Keep in touch. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.